Run.
All right, good evening, everyone. We'll get started. It's a little bit after 6 o'clock, so let's get started, kind of respectful of time and everything for everybody. We're gonna have to share microphones around as we work this evening, so bear with us on that. But if we'll get started, this is gonna be our meeting for Thursday, July 30th, 6 p.m. here at the Fairplex. And just keep your seat. We'll start off with an invocation, and we'll call the meeting to order. There was some agendas out there on the table outside. It's kind of a guide for us. If there's no action items tonight, this is truly a roundtable talk and discussion between us and AEP and CPS. We appreciate y'all coming and meeting with us this evening and stuff here in New Valley. So if you'll just stay where you're at, bow your heads, we'll go to the Lord in prayer, please. Our dear Heavenly Father, I come to you with a heavy heart, but truly blessed for protecting us over the last week or so. Lord, our country needed it, our springs, our lakes and so forth. The tragedies were minimum. Things can be rebuilt, but our hearts are heavy, but our trust is in you. Father, I know you're help us, guide us, and lead us through this. Not only through this tragedy, but also through this meeting tonight. Bless these folks who traveled here to visit with us. Bless these folks who are representing their constituents, and that they may serve you and then our communities. Father, I thank you for the blessing, good and bad, but the lessons learned to make us stronger Christians in our faith in you. Father, please bless our military families and friends wherever they may be tonight, protecting our freedoms, our law enforcement, our first responders, and all those folks over the last week or two have really stepped up and gone above and beyond, but just not the last 2 weeks, but the whole time they're on duty so they can get home safely to their families. Those who are sick and ailing may not know it, may not be reaching out to you. We reach them up to you, Father, and we ask you to continue to bless them. Father, I'm just so thankful. That you protected my family. Last week, the flood hit me pretty hard, but thank you. We just continue to realize that you put us here for a reason. Our path is with you, and our trust must lie within you. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Sorry about that. But my wife had to be rescued with a helicopter.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, all right. Call to order. Meeting will call the meeting to order at 6:07. Is the PA okay? Everybody understands, got a little bit of echo. Maybe turn it down just a little bit more. We'll see if that helps us a little bit. But 6:07, we'll call the meeting to order. The agenda items, welcome and introduction. We'll go around the table right quick and let everyone introduce themselves, what they're representing, who they're representing or working for, so forth like that. And then we'll start in. I am John Paul Schuster. I'm the county judge in my first term in Kenny County. The subcommission is made up of a representative from Kenny County, a representative from the city of Sabinal, a representative from the city of Uvalde, and a representative from the Uvalde County. The subcommission is a part of our COG. Just a brief summary right quick. The county of governments, there's 8 of us in our county there's 8 counties that make up our COG out here and so forth. So the subcommission is inside that COG. That's why it's limited to those cities and counties within those COGs. But we'll go around the room right quick. The commission, the folks, and how you serve and who you serve, and then our guests, and then also our guests with AEP and CPS. I ask that y'all introduce yourself and your roles, whatever. We have name tags with their face and me, so I can't remember who's sitting at this table as we speak this evening. So, but again, there's no public comment tonight. This is a roundtable discussion with us. Y'all are welcome to listen and chime and be a part of us listening. Any hecklers or anything like that, I'm gonna kick you out. We're not gonna accomplish anything that way. This is us, the commission, visiting with these folks. They took their time to come here and meet with us upon our request. So this is our table discussion. We do have 4 guests, and I'll let them introduce themselves as we go around the table. But with that, I'll turn it over and I'll start right now. Harry, I'll start with you and stuff, and then we'll go around the table this way. Does this one work? Yeah, just flip the bottom off. I'll just go around this way. I'm Brett Smith. I'm the county attorney for. Speak up. Speak up. You can hear me. Speak.
I'm on the front row.
Speak up. Hey. I'm Brett Smith. I'm the county attorney for. There you go. County. Got to talk like the talk back room. I'm not a voting member, but I'm here as an advisor.
John Sewell, Abbott Ranch and Wildlife Operation in Uvalde and Kenny County. So this will affect me in several areas in both counties, and just have questions about the general consensus of our wildlife operation.
All right.
I'm Scott Brown, and my family is well represented here. We also own a ranch in Kenny County. I participated in the SOA case from beginning to end, and we have some concerns. And hopefully tonight we can start to get some clarity and some answers.
All right.
Good evening. I'm Kip Giles. I'm a Deputy General Counsel at CPS Energy and work the transmission group that is responsible for building the eastern part of this line.
Speak up, use an outside voice so they can hear us. You think you're loud, but you're not.
Hold it pretty close.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Gould. I'm Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Legal for AEP Texas. And on this particular project, I assisted with the regulatory requirements and the hearing, and then advised on some legal aspects as well.
Chad Pomenek with AEP Texas. I'm a regulatory case manager and supported the regulatory filing for this case.
Daniel Otto with CPS Energy. I'm a regulatory support manager with CPS. I also supported the team routing and siting these transmission lines.
Jimmy Artist, AEP Texas External Affairs here in Uvalde.
Rob Keeley, I sit on the Park Municipal Utility District, which supplies the water to half the county in Kenny County.
Good evening. My name is Eric Gomez, and I am the mayor of the city of Savannah.
My name is Roy Copeland. I am County Commissioner for Uvalde County and sit on the 391 Commission at the request of the county judge for Uvalde County.
I'm Todd Mims, City Councilman for the City of Uvalde.
And Margaret Whitefield, American Stewards of Liberty and consultant to the commission.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Again, thank you all for being here and taking time to be here. Thank you all for being here as well. Our opening remarks this evening, we'll kind of went around the introduction and stuff. I'm going to ask Ms. Byfield right quick to kind of do an overview of the coordination process that drives the 391 subcommission and stuff and everything. Break that down for us, Ms. Byfield, a little bit.
Sure. Thank you, Judge. So the coordination process, as you know, this commission was formed under 391 statute, and that statute requires that all state agencies shall coordinate to the greatest extent feasible with the sub-regional planning commission. And so it's a way, the purpose of that, the reason that the state legislature put this in to the code was to make sure that when any statewide actions were occurring, like a plan, such as a big transmission siting plan, that the local governments wouldn't be run over, that their needs, what they needed in their community would be considered in that planning process. And it was put in specifically to make sure that the state agencies were required and directed to coordinate with the local sub-regional planning commissions for that purpose. So that's really the purpose of this meeting. This would be the first official coordination meeting between your entities and the sub-regional planning commission. Coordination is really meant to be a way to harmonize the objectives. And I think one of the things that can help put it in perspective is you really are acting on behalf of the state by putting this transmission line in. And your role in all of this is to provide that transmission line. That's what you're charged to do. the charge of the commission is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people. And so that's not your responsibility, that's their responsibility. And the purpose of coordination is to make sure both of those responsibilities are harmonious. One doesn't dominate the other. And that's the point of coordination. And when you look at the definition of coordination, it means equal, not subordinate. So in this instance, we have the state that is directing state agencies or those entities acting out the state's responsibilities. The state is directed to coordinate to the greatest extent feasible. So it makes everything that these guys say at this table, their plans and their policies, are things that you all need to strongly consider in your process and work to resolve those conflicts. So hopefully today, I think what we're going to talk a lot about today are some of those conflicts. And then the expectation is that we have a good back and forth. How do we resolve those?
All right, thank you, Ms. Byfield. Now, I just handed each one of y'all and stuff, and this is our policy statement. This is a living document for our commission as we work through this and everything and so forth. I'm not about to read this to you this evening, okay? But basically, the 391, the top two paragraphs in there is we're opposing the proposed Howard Leach 76 transmission line as it may be located in Uvalde and Kenny County, supporting the protection of private property rights, natural resources, economic stability, and public health. Just as Ms. Byfield explained in her comments just now. Coordination and so forth, with all the parties involved and so forth. That's kind of going to be it for our opening statement for our end. Okay. Y'all are welcome. CPS, AEP can have an opening statement. You're more than welcome to do that. For the folks that are in the room this evening, understand that CPS is building the eastern portion is their responsibility of the line. AEP thus is taking care of the western portion of it. So for our portion of Uvalde and Kenny County, that line would be under the construction oversight process of CPS Energy, and the other western side of it would be AEP. But AEP is also here tonight for us, and thank y'all for that. So with that, I'll turn it over to whoever would like to speak on y'all's behalf and so forth. You can get a few minutes to give us a overview. If you don't want to, if you just want to move on, you're welcome to turn that down and we'll move on. But by all means, I'll give you a few minutes. Y'all do rock, paper, scissors and decide who wants to speak. Yeah, kind of use your outside voice and get it pretty close. Don't be scared. Just because you think you're loud right here, you're probably just about right out there. We can try that. Y'all want to try that? I think y'all are going to have a hard time hearing them with your back to you, though.
Are they going to pick it up?
Probably not. We'll try to talk with, where's the microphone? The microphone guy's back there. The speaker guy, you want to turn it down a little bit more so we're speaking and talking and so forth? It's just echoing on you? All right, we'll work on that as we're talking. Mr. Giles, who would like to speak? CPS.
Yeah, Kip Giles again from CPS Energy. We're here to talk with y'all this evening. I think if anybody wants an overview of the whole project, we're happy to do it. But I'm kind of here and I'm going to go off with the guidance that y'all want to cover. I don't want to waste time covering something y'all already know. So, we're here. I'm happy to get into it. We'll talk about any aspect of it we can. As you know, this is pending at the PUC right now. It's an active case. It's been, some of the people sitting at this table, Mr. Brown said he's been participating in it. I think others have too. So, we're here for y'all. I will, if you get a topic you want to delve into, that's where we're going. I think that's would be the best way to use our time.
My name is Stephanie. I work at AEP Texas. As a transmission and distribution utility, we have an obligation to serve under state law, and it really is a privilege to serve our neighbors, our friends, our local businesses. And so that is something that we take with great seriousness. We don't take that obligation lightly. I think we can all acknowledge that with a process like we have to follow. We follow the statutes and the rules that are set forth by the state and the Public Utility Commission. There's probably always room for improvement in a process. Yesterday, we heard Chair Gleason talk about how the Public Utility Commission is interested in some revisions to the process for these CCN hearings. And, we definitely want to support our state agencies and our state as a whole, and also hear you all for what your feedback might be so we can take that back. So thank you for having us.
All right. Anybody else? We're good. All right. Everybody's good there. All right. We're gonna go into with our 4 guests, and we're gonna start with Mr. Huey down here, Travis Huey, and let him address concerns and things and so forth regarding what kind of his specialty is about municipality water and so forth.
Okay, got to be on. Well, yeah,
There you go.
okay. Thank you, Judge Schuster, and thank you, representatives from AEP and CBS for being here. We'll just dive right into it. So the section of concern for us at the utility district, which supplies all of the water to the southern side of Kenny County. So any of the residents that are on the southern side of 90, which reside within the bounds of the Fort Clark Municipal Utility District, are serviced through the Edwards Trinity Aquifer. Okay, so you have 3 different sources of water that are put out to the public, right, and distributed to the public. So you've got us at Fort Clark Mud. You also have the city of Bracketville, and then you have the school district who has their own well system as well. So the section of concern is from 334 and Highway 90 to the northeastern bounds of the county, which is where your transmission line is set to run. That is our recharge zone. That is a karst aquifer. So we've been studying this for over 20 years. Okay, if you followed anything that's been going on in Kenny County with in regard to water, you know that this has been a hot topic for 2 decades, if not more. We have done a lot of research. We've spent millions of dollars on trying to understand how the water flows under the ground. Once we get it above ground, we know what to do with it. We know how to move it around. It's safe. It's great. But getting it from when it rains into our aquifer system is what we still do not understand. So having a better understanding of what, I guess in this case would be CPS, if that's the construction on that side of the line, where would we look to understand that driving this equipment and then also placing these towers in a system that we have no understanding? We have no idea what's underneath the ground. And when we start to put up towers, if we crush any part of that system, that could shut off the recharge to our municipal water systems, which serve 3,000 residents. Those 3 systems serve 3,000 residents, the only water supply in Kenny County. We have no other options. And just for scale, if we were to have to supply water to our residents via truck, which has happened when other systems in this area have had problems. Concan specifically last year was all over the place looking for water trucks to haul in. We would need 125 10,000-gallon trucks a day to do that. So that, and we're kind of on an island. If you look at how we're set up, to the west of us, you've got Valverde County. To the south of us, you've got Maverick County. And when you look at the water, and then to the east, you've got Uvalde County. When you look at our water system, we're sort of on an island. We're on the very edge of the Edwards Aquifer. In fact, we didn't participate in the Edwards Aquifer Authority, but in that system, we're kind of on the edge of everything. So we don't have a natural place to go to say what would be our secondary water source. Our secondary water source would be to truck it in. So the concern would be, what are we looking at as far as underneath the ground? Because in 2 decades, we haven't been able to figure it out. And we've had consultants, environmental consultants, there's been dye tests, and none of that's been conclusive that tells us if it rains here, you're going to get water. It's always a changing landscape of where the water flows, how does it get into the system, what's changed on the landscape, which I'm sure you'll hear more about later. But our concern is, how do we make sure and ensure that when we put this line in that goes through this area and all the equipment goes through there, that we don't impact the ability to recharge the only municipal water supply. Thank you.
How do you want to just respond to this?
Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah, let's start.
I mean, Dan, do you want to? I mean, we can comment on what we're doing in construction.
So your concern is surface traffic is going to damage the karst structures beneath the surface?
Not just the surface traffic, that's one phase of it, right? So the first phase, yes, as you're driving equipment over these areas, we don't know. I mean, there's no map that says, hey, don't drive here, or don't drive there. And then secondary, when you put the towers in to string this line, if you go in and you say, okay, we're going to put this tower here, and your footing goes through a section that we're unaware is a part of the recharge under the ground, which again, we do not have any conclusive evidence to tell us where it is. So we're just kind of saying, there. I mean, we don't know, and we've been studying it for 20 years. And we have every vested interest in the world in figuring this out, and we haven't been able to figure it out yet. So that's where my question comes from, is what can be done, what is being done, or has there been anything done to consider what's underneath the ground and how would we mitigate that risk? Because that is the only recharge to our aquifer system.
So we commonly use, you walk the line and look for voids that'll typically be pointing to where these karst features are. We also have used ground penetrating radar to confirm once the line is designed that there's not voids where we're planning to install the structures. All this typically comes after the route has been selected. I think that currently the Public Utility Commission is debating where it should go. So once it is selected, that's when the kind of in-depth engineering happens. And like I said, commonly we do geotechnical studies, which include soil bores. Sometimes we've done ground penetrating radar, again, in those areas where there's known karst features, and that sort of thing. I think CPS Energy, as you pointed out, we have the Edwards Aquifer as our water supply, and so we have a vast amount of time constructing transmission lines in karst areas through areas that have a similar water feature. That's not the right term, but you know what I'm saying. Aquifer that. So I think we have the tools. We've done it before. I don't know specifically what we would do until the route is selected, and then we would work with the counties and the landowners to ensure the is done.
Okay.
I would just add that, we spend a lot of time, the things that Dan is talking about, to mitigate the effect and avoid. That's our biggest strategy, is avoidance, because that is the best way to do it. And so, all those things that Dan talked about, we do have a very experienced team in doing that. Like Dan says, this is not new to have to build in karst areas or the presence of karst. They're all over our territory, especially on the north and western side, northwestern side. It's pretty prominent. So, I think we have a lot of experience in it. And so, but right now we're just going over the data. Like, you say yourself, you've been studying 20 years. We've studied everything we can. You've seen that. We have that environmental analysis. It's on the PUC's website as part of our application. And there's a good bit of study about that in there. And this isn't like the first time we've ever had to build in an area that as car features or the presence of cars being a possibility.
Yeah, yes, I understand, I understand the area that you work in. Unfortunately, as a rural county and a rural, conservation district, we don't have all the money that has been put together to understand the recharge zone of the Edwards Aquifer. We don't have that. We don't have the information to say, this is where that is. So just what I'm trying to get forward here is that we don't have the document. We know that the water comes from there. We know that much we know. We don't have all of the information that others have, that you've seen in the past, that you've worked with in the past. And we only have one shot at this. We don't have a different way to, as you know, because you've worked with them, once they're crushed, they're crushed. And we don't have another source. So that's the point that I'm bringing forward, and we don't have the documentation.
Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself right quick for everybody?
Kirk Rasmussen. Sorry, I was driving back from a settlement discussion in Austin and I got stuck on I-35. I apologize for being late and interrupting y'all.
Legal counsel for
Legal
CPS.
counsel for CPS.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ms. Byfield, you had a comment?
Yeah, so as you heard him just explain, if it isn't put in properly and
Speak up.
if it isn't put in properly and a section is crushed, then they're looking at having to, or did I understand it right, 125,000 trucks a day?
No,
125,
125 trucks a day.
10,000 gallons each.
Is that kind of detail in your environmental assessment? In other words, these are the specific impacts. I mean, you can do kind of a high level 50,000 foot EA. That kind of gives it, yes, there's a karst area here. Yes, we've got to be concerned about it. But actual specific impacts, is that in the environmental assessment so that the PUC have that information to evaluate the wells?
I mean, I don't think that exact fact is in our environmental assessment, but I mean, there's been I haven't read every piece of testimony, but I mean, that's an obvious impact that, I mean, I think we have, done these type of projects in a lot of areas similar to these areas. And, I've been doing it for 17 years, which isn't a lot, but that's some. And I don't know that we've ever incurred a transmission line that have impacted an aquifer or a recharge zone in any manner that would create no recovery for the entire aquifer. I mean, that's just not a consequence that's going to occur.
We are dealing with taller lines, right? These 765 is a different.
They're very similar to 345 that, I mean, it is so similar in the way they're constructed. The footings might be wider, but they're not there's no real, I mean, I'd have to get one of these guys on the engineering side to confirm that, but you're not talking about a drastic difference from what they did. I mean, it's just that they are taller. Those are triple circuit. I mean, they're double circuits for the 345. This is a single circuit 765. I mean, it carries more than a double circuit, but it is very similar type construction.
Yeah, just the structure height for the 765 lines, as Kip was explaining, is the same height range that we would see for a 345 double circuit structure. These are lattice structures, that's not something that CPS has constructed recently, but AEP has done a lot, and they're helping us with the engineering on it. It's similar structures.
Are there other 345 lines in the state of Texas double circuit?
Yes, there's the majority of 345 lines that you would see, and I don't know, it's the majority.
The one along I-10.
Yeah,
It's a double circuit, 345 lines. That LCRA line along I-10.
Yeah, I guess I can't say the majority, but yeah,
There's a lot.
there's a lot. That's common because if you're already building using that right of way, it just makes more sense to impact less landowners and put two circuits. But it makes the structures about the same height as these 765 structures.
So, one thing I think, I apologize for being late again, but one thing to remember is that our environmental assessment, we recorded the karst areas, we recorded the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone, and we identified route alternatives that are in that area and ones that are not. So one of the factors that led to CPS Energy and AEP's recommendation about the route that we felt best met the criteria was the fact that it avoided the karst area and the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone. So one of the factors that weighed into the recommendation, and again, that was a recommendation, the judge's recommendation. Ultimately, the utility commission will identify the route, but we indicated, one of the factors for the routing that we suggested to them was based on, it avoided the karst areas and it avoided the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone. Now, to Kip's point, we believe we can construct it safely. We will, and it's something that we will coordinate with local governments and TCQ and all the other entities as to how we manage that construction. But there are alternatives in front of the commission to consider that avoid those features in those areas. And again, it was in our application, it was one of the things we listed about why we thought a routing that should be considered would be, avoiding those areas.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we're gonna go to our next, well, we're not done, but we're gonna let our four guests kind of get things started and then kind of go from there. There's no script to this. Okay, this is our passion and our constituents' compassion. Okay, Mr. Sewell, I'm gonna kick it off to you next, please, sir. Let you address kind of wildlife and ranching and so forth in that business. Go ahead.
John Sewell, I met earlier with these guys and, the questions that we talked about in the past and the things that I think we're really concerned about, obviously, number one is water. In the defense of understanding the water, I think the more people that would get a little bit of help from the state water board and put in some monitoring wells and understand our water a little bit better, like I have done myself, really puts into perspective where it rains and when it rains and how these wells react. It's been amazing to me through this last flood, having water wells that are monitored by the state that have been in a continuous decline for 2 years. And it rains, in huge amounts here in the last couple of weeks. And in one day, the aquifer goes up 22 feet. That I would have never bet on, that it would have happened that fast. And two, understanding where that rain fell based on Kinney County. The well that I have a monitoring well in is in the Edwards Balcones Fault. It's a relatively 154 foot total depth. And it's exactly on the county line. So very interesting for all of us that don't understand how the water falls, as he said, and where it goes. Just that stuff. If more people would get involved, we would have a better picture. So the other thing that I've talked about before, and I think a lot of people in my industry and in our area is anthrax endemic area. We talked about that in the past and how we're going to mitigate that and who's a professional, who's going to tell us what to do, how we're going to deal with it, what's going to bring it up or cause it. Is it disruption in the soil? Is it rainfall? It's all of the above. We're set up to potentially have a very active anthrax season because of this rainfall that we just had. If we turn off dry and stay 100 degrees and our vector being a horsefly is already spawning heavily, we potentially are going to have an outbreak. So that's obviously not an interest to you guys today, but when it comes, and I think I mentioned in the past that the first animal that dies, it doesn't matter whatever, it's going to be your fault. So you know, having that is important. The other thing I think for myself and other people who are in the hunting business and wildlife operations is how we mitigate the liability of traffic in and out during hunting season and people hunting near or close to the right of way with people driving up and down it. I would think Kurt would be able to answer that one pretty well.
I'll take a shot.
No, no pun intended there. You're taking a shot. Okay, all right.
Literally.
So anthrax, let me start with hunting because that one's a little more common. We're more used to that. That's definitely something during the right-of-way negotiation and the easement acquisition process we can work out with the landowners. You know, how are you using the property? And with some degree of flexibility, we can manage the construction schedule so that we're not putting your hunters at risk, we're not putting our construction crews at risk, and we can manage around that. We do understand that for a lot of these properties, that's, you know, one of the largest uses of that property and how we manage that impact. It's going to be probably one season we're working around, given the way these construction schedules work. So it wouldn't be a long-term impact. Once the line's in place, then it's a matter of if we needed to come out and access it, you know, short of an emergency on the line, and those aren't really anticipated, but short of an emergency, we're going to, you know, contact the landowner. We need to do a survey of the line. We're going to be out there on this day, so you're aware. But, you know, our crews are used to working around, you know, these types of properties and their hunting uses. And I'll tell you, Kip and I were talking about this earlier. We tend to find that once the line's in place, the hunters like to use the roads and put their blinds on the edge of the right of way and using for shooting lines. Nice, you know, straight corridors, but it's something we're used to working around. Anthrax, I think, is a little different. Obviously, y'all have as much knowledge as anyone in the country about how that works. You are right. That's a problem 2 years from now during construction, and so I think it's something we're going to be monitoring with y'all. Sorry, we're going to be monitoring with y'all. No, rarely does anyone ever tell me to bring the mic closer. See that? So that's something I think we're going to work with the landowners as well about, you know, are the conditions when it comes time for construction. We've talked with several of the elected officials about that already, about that concern. We've, you know, tried to get pretty smart on it as much as we can. But one thing we learned was that the landowners know as much about that as anyone. So, you know, I'm telling you that we're going to work with the Department of Health and Human Services, and you're going to give me the same that look, and it's like, you know, we know what the conditions are and how to manage that. And so I don't think we're naive to the fact that the best resources is going to be the landowners. So working with them on that, that's a concern if the conditions are right 2 years from now when we're talking about that construction. So it is something that we're aware of, and we've tried to map it and understand it. But, you know, we'll be looking to work with y'all.
As a landowner, several of us sitting here deal with anthrax. We vaccinate annually for it, helpful. But my concern is it's very heavy on the east side of me, which would incorporate the Browns and the Souls, okay? But if it's not in an area real bad, and all of a sudden all our construction, we're talking about doing the right of way and taking everything out and all that dirt work and then the erosion and stuff, because it lives in the soil. And it's only going to go away if the soil freezes 18 inches. It ain't going away. That's my concern as a landowner and stuff, is that I don't have it as bad on the west side as I do the east side, but everything gets vaccinated. But it's this equipment's moving and transporting dust, dirt. The oil field industry does it. They have washout kits. They got to wash their vehicles, their boots and stuff before they leave a property to go to another to try to keep moving weeds and things they don't want to move. So that's a big concern for a lot of us out here, is that movement. I don't have it bad, and all of a sudden now I do have it bad a year or two later because of the dirt work, the equipment, the trucks and so forth. So I would really ask that y'all really consider and be very cognizant of that. Working around the hunting season, we have MLDs. So some of our hunting seasons are from October to February. It's a tremendous amount of time. Okay, and hunting for some of us is a very vital income source for us. So that's gonna need to be addressed from one end of this line to the other. Doesn't matter. Okay, and please remember tonight, we're not just talking about Route 4. This is every blue line in our counties. Just because the judges like Route 4, we're sitting here for all those lines and things, okay? So please, but I just want to chime in on the anthrax deal, that's a huge concern for us to move that and make it worse in an area or reintroduce it in an area that maybe not have it. And it's been fairly safe, but now it's not because of the amount of dirt work that's done here and up and down the transmission line and so forth. John, anybody else? Ms. Byfield?
The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is you talk about the line that maybe we're talking about, the alternative route number 4. It is in the center of our property, which would be pretty much in the recharge zone. So I have recharge holes south of it, and obviously a west prong of the new ACES is there just north of it. So, I think those are things that probably need to be looked at is we are in the recharge zone.
Okay.
I was just going to ask one more question on the anthrax. Is that what they just discussed about that being in the soil and potential spread and impacts? Is that in the EA?
Yes.
So it's explained to that level. So the PUC knows about it and has enough detail about it to select which route based on that.
We addressed it and they're aware of it. I don't know that there's any route options that avoid what, we've come to know as the anthrax triangle. I don't know that we have any route options that avoid it, but the environmental assessment does address it. But as I said before, it was new to us, kind of the concern, and we've been educating ourselves. Our consultant was educating themselves and research, so it's addressed. I can tell you, we didn't have a route that could avoid it based on how the routing geography laid out. There are some that impact it more than others. But I will tell you, we will look to y'all to help educate us on best practices and, what those best practices will be. And we'll, work to implement what we can that's feasible.
All right. Sewell, you good? All right. From Mr. Sewell, then I'm gonna come back around to Mr. Brown. Mr. Robinson is not able to join us, so I'm gonna turn it. Mr. Brown will visit a little bit about ranching operations and so forth and daily activities there.
For our guests, for the commissioners. Good evening, my name is Scott Brown. My family has owned and operated Turkey Mountain Ranch in King County for more than 100 years. My brother and I are the 3rd generation, and he's here. 2nd generation is sitting right here. And the 4th and 5th generations are sitting right over there. I participated in the Howard Solstice SOA case from beginning to end, and the commission has asked me to explain what the process looked like from the perspective of an affected landowner. Before I do that, I want to be clear that I remain convinced that Texas needs this massive 765 kilovolt build out. One of the studies commonly cited in support of it was paid for by the Texas Energy Buyers Alliance and Google. And then Google urged the PUC to approve ERCOT's proposal a couple of days before the commission approved it. That doesn't automatically make the study wrong, but it's fair to question whether Texas has received truly independent evaluation of the record of the need, But we're operating under the laws and the decisions currently in place, and I am here primarily to describe what the process felt like from the landowner side. When the early open houses were held, links 83A and 257 didn't exist. At that time, the proposed line did not cross our range, so we were not notified that we needed to attend or begin preparing for a contested case. Those links were added later. We didn't learn that our ranch was affected until the formal landowner packet arrived less than a month before the intervention deadline. By then, hundreds of landowners were trying to find lawyers, and many attorneys were already conflicted out. So while the process might have complied with the letter of the law, many landowners entered it after the most meaningful opportunity to influence the planning had already passed. Do you want to address anything in that before I move on?
Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to stop. I mean, you have his statements
about
written.
4 points
Yeah.
that I'd like to go through.
You can keep going.
Okay. The second problem is that a map does not show how a ranch actually functions. Turkey Mountain Ranch is about 10,000 acres, but not every acre is equally usable. Link 83A crosses what my brother has called the heart of the ranch in his testimony. The area with the best soil and grass, and where many of our homes, roads, wells, stock tanks, livestock operations, and daily activity are concentrated. That's not accidental. The land itself dictates where those activities occur. Our stock tanks also cannot simply be moved somewhere else on the map. Their locations reflect generations of observing rainfall, springs, water runoff, drainage, and soil conditions. Roads, tower pads, grading, and heavy construction can alter those systems in ways that are not obvious from GIS data. We also learned that what appears to be a property boundary on a map may simply be an internal tract line within one unified ranch. And bisecting the operational center of a ranch can be far more disruptive than following a true outside boundary or compatible corridor. I've shown you this map that appears to show that y'all deliberately routed 83A along parcel boundaries. The orange line is the outside boundary of our ranch. The green lines are merely internal appraisal parcels. Link 83 may appear to follow property lines, but those lines do not separate different ranches. They run through one unified operation. In reality, the route bisects the heart of our ranch. And as we heard in the SOA case, that presents a difficulty for helicopter operators who a lot of the ranchers in this area depend on for rounding up livestock, monitoring wildlife, doing aerial surveys. Another problem was the disconnect between the evidence landowners presented and the data that continued to drive the route comparisons. WSP, an outside consultant hired by the applicants, performed the routing study, collected and mapped the constraints, and prepared the environmental assessment used to compare the routes. During the hearing, landowners presented photographs, surveys, videos, official records, and firsthand testimony identifying missing or inaccurately represented homes, water features, cultural resources, and other conditions on their land. Some materials were revised during the case, but the fundamental result did not change. The applicants continued to recommend Route 4, PUC staff continued to recommend Route 4, and the ALJs ultimately recommended Route 4. That left many landowners wondering what purpose our evidence actually served if correcting or expanding the facts on the ground did not appear to change the comparative analysis. I would appreciate CPS and AEP addressing this directly. What would the landowner's evidence have needed to show for either applicant to reconsider which route best met the statutory criteria?
Okay, I'll start, I'll work backwards on that point. So, and we tried to make clear, and if we did not in the case, I apologize, that we identify the route that we believe best met the criteria at the time we filed the application. And we recognize and we agree that a lot of information was added to the record based on a lot of factors that were provided by the landowners. And with the exception of a very limited number of things, objected to none of it coming into the evidence in front of the judges, and frankly supported and helped many landowners filing and presenting that information to the judges. We don't At that point, once we file our application, our recommendation is done. We don't make any further recommendations to the judges as to what they should do. And so we didn't continue to advocate for or against any route other than we provided a suite of route alternatives and, encourage the judges, and will continue to encourage the commission to pick the route that they believe best meets the criteria based on the totality of the evidence, including what the landowners presented. We don't dispute it and believe that it provides a more robust record. And I will tell you, I've been doing this slightly longer than Kip, but not a whole lot longer. And the commission quite often, in fact, if you went and looked statistically, the commission most often picks a route different than the one the utility identifies as the best meets route. If it's a contested case, quite often they'll pick a different one. And they pick it based on the totality of the evidence. And in fact, one of the things that's going to happen is the commission's going to have an open meeting, and they're going to take additional public input from all of the parties to the case. And that's important. And what you all bring to the commission and tell them of the impacts of Route 4 or Route 13 or whichever route, my experience is they listen. And they make decisions based on the totality of the factors in front of them, not based on what the utility says. And if I had a track record of saying we're right 90% of the time, we don't want to be right. We want the commission to pick the route that's in the best public interest and the best interest of the community, and that's based on the landowner's input. And y'all have an important opportunity to present that to the commission at an open meeting and tell them what you think about the impacts to your property. And so we let the record stand for what it is based on what we initially presented, and then whatever the landowners bring in front of the judges. And then that recommendation, I hope if you read our brief, we didn't advocate. We tried to advocate, here's the evidence, here's what you've seen, and here's why we initially identified Route 4. But whatever the commission has in front of them, whatever the judge had in front of them, it's their decision. So I can't tell you other than what the judges wrote about their recommendation and why they picked that. I can tell you, I don't disagree that for a lot of large properties, parcel boundaries to y'all are meaningless. We have them. We understand that they're not true property boundaries. In some instances, we're trying to follow any corridor we can to get from one way to another. And if we have a choice and there's no other way, we'd rather follow a parcel boundary than nothing. But I don't disagree that 83A, it is following a parcel boundary. And we were aware, we have the tax records. We can see, as long as the parcels are owned and we can see they're going to the same address, sometimes it might be, one parcel might be you or your brother or an aunt. And so we try best we can to understand joint ownership of properties. And we don't disagree, to the extent we know what a property is. There, for a line as long as this, there are properties that we end up crossing through the middle to go in a straight area. But I don't disagree that that's an impact. And if we have nothing else to follow, and you can see kind of as that 83A was laid out, there wasn't a good way to get from one to the other. If we have no other option, we'll follow a parcel boundary. With respect to helicopter operations, I don't disagree that these lines can impact helicopter operations. We'll work with the landowners best we can to mark them if that's important. But I don't disagree that these lines can impact operations. With respect to route changes, I can tell you how these came about. When we have an open house and we present preliminary segments to the community, we also present them to government agencies, including the Department of Defense. And when you send a notice to the Department of Defense and say, we've laid out these preliminary segments, what do you think? And they pick up the phone and they say, you have to stay 7 nautical miles away from this radar facility. We're not going to have a route that's within 7 miles of that radar facility of the United States Air Force. And so preliminary segments that may have been south of your property, If the United States Air Force says you have to remove that, they got removed. And then that requires you to make adjustments. And so one of the parts of this process is you present preliminary segments, and if people raise concerns about the viability of those segments, you have to make adjustments. And unfortunately, for your property, one of those adjustments to avoid a segment impacted by the United States Air Force created a movement to your property.
That wasn't the case, right?
I'm speaking to 257. We'd have to look at how 83A came about.
A landowner said that the original 83 was too close to his house. So y'all removed 83. And that's how 83A came about. It had nothing to do with the Department of Defense.
I can tell you how 257 came about. The modifications to 83A, we'd have to review the record. I can't sit here and tell you it was based on a particular landowner's house or not. Whatever's in the record, I won't deny whatever the environmental assessment or our record might say on that. Typically, there's a variety of reasons we might look to make an adjustment to a segment. And not too far from this area, obviously, is the new state parks that we were having to make route modifications based on the Silver Lake State Park and what Parks and Wildlife told us about that property, as well as the other state park that they acquired in the study area. So I can't tell you specifically, and I won't dispute that if that's what you were told, but a landowner saying we moved it because of their comments, that may or may not have had an impact.
I have a quick question. Once the application, assuming this is all the way implemented and it goes into the ground, or before it goes into the ground, what adjustments or flexibility do y'all have to make adjustments to account for something that wasn't aware to y'all originally?
That's a really good question. The commission order requires us to work with directly affected landowners, that's somebody crossed by the route, to make minor route modifications in coordination with the landowner. Now, just to be clear, for a line like this, that's not an easy task. And sometimes with properties as large as this, a lot of times the preferred course is if we can work with you and your neighbors and we can make larger adjustments. But for a project like this, putting a lot of angles to avoid something is really expensive, and it makes the line very aesthetically unpleasing. If you start to put these very large, massive angle structures, it can make a much worse impact in addition to the cost. But so the answer is the commission will order us to work with landowners to make minor route modifications. They haven't clarified what that means. We work with landowners to try and do what we can to minimize the impact to the property.
You don't have clarification on what minor adjustments mean yet.
I think it's in your interest and in our interest not to have the commission tell us that you could do this or that, because then that takes the flexibility out of us and you to figure it out. I don't want them to say 1% cost or a 2% cost or this length or that length. It's a negotiation process and it's a cost benefit analysis. Is it more efficient for us to pay to relocate a well and shut in the existing one? That's a compensation question. Is it easier to relocate a well, drill a new well versus move the whole line? That's a discussion. But what I can tell is the commission order will tell us work with you to do what we can.
And one thing. So it doesn't bug you that your original recommendation at the time of filing the application was based on incomplete and inaccurate data that was corrected by landowners on the ground? Like, y'all are okay with making such a huge decision based on inaccurate and incomplete data?
I would frame it slightly differently. I would say we file our application based on the best available data that we can gather at the time of the filing of the application. And our view is the process is set up to provide an opportunity for landowners to present additional information. Y'all will always know the property better than we do. We don't have access to it. We can't do property surveys of every route, every segment. We will, following a commission order, but the process is set up to allow landowners to come and bring that to the commission. It's why, the judges make a recommendation based not only on our application, but based on information the landowners bring. And so I would say we recognize the limitation of what we can provide and encourage parties to present everything they want to the judges and then to the commission, and let the commission base their decision on the totality. And that's why I will tell you, we don't revisit our decision, because that decision is now out of our hands. It's for the judges and the commission to decide, not us. And it's based on the totality of the evidence that we will all admit is better than what we can bring based on what we can see from public roadways, what we can gain from publicly accessible documents. And so we encourage people to bring that to the commission and let them make a decision based on all of it.
Finally, this is the first generation of 765 kilovolt projects in Texas. During the hearing, 38% of the questions about structure locations, foundations, access roads, drainage, aviation, construction methods, and mitigation were deferred by y'all's own expert panelists until after route selection or additional engineering. We've already heard this type of deferment tonight from Mr. Otto, and he used the phrase "after the line is designed." And Mr. Rasmussen said about anthrax, when it's time for construction. It's hard for us to feel comfortable with these changes y'all are proposing to our land without some confidence in these things. It's also in the record that none of the members of your hearing panel had ever planned or built a 765 kilovolt transmission line before. Landowners were being asked to accept a permanent routing decision while many practical consequences remain unknown. Senator Kevin Sparks and Representative Brad Buckley have asked that final approval be paused until ERCOT completes an updated analysis and the legislature has had an opportunity to examine whether these projects and the process behind them are still justified. I hope AEP and CPS will explain what they have learned from this process, from landowners entering late, from the limitations of maps, from evidence that did not appear to change the analysis, and from so many important questions being deferred. But my direct question tonight is this. And with respect, I'd like to hear first from the AEP and CPS employees before legal counsel, and then I'd be glad to hear the legal perspective afterwards. As fellow Texans and taxpayers, will AEP and CPS support the Sparks-Buckley request to pause final approval until ERCOT completes an updated independent review and the Texas legislature has an opportunity to examine these projects and the process behind them?
CPS will support what the process and the final decision is. I personally and CPS will not file testimony or anything on behalf of the Sparks proposal that you said, because that's not what we were charged to do. And so we will support what the final decision is. I mean, that is all we can do. If we don't do it, they will replace us with another utility to do it. And I think that we're a very conscientious utility, and we do good practices. We're used to dealing with our customers, and we do keep you in mind. But I mean, we are a utility. We are charged with building a line, and we will support what the total outcome of this whole process will be.
With respect, I ask as fellow Texans and taxpayers, do you think we should be spending these billions of dollars while there is so much unknown, and a proposed study to get answers to that unknown is on the table? I know you've got your your company hat on. I'm asking as Texans and taxpayers, should we be spending billions of dollars on so many unknowns?
Really, I'm here on CPS Energy's behalf, and that's all I can answer your question.
Mr. Brown, I want to just take a step back for a moment and just thank you for your participation in the hearing. I know you said you represented your family and were in it from the beginning. It was I have a quiet voice.
Speak up.
We'll try.
Yes, you do.
It was a long process. Part of my role was to oversee the hearing logistics and help work on that with the team. And so we did put a lot of thought into it and tried to make it as accommodating as possible to the landowners. But I know it's difficult when you're not a lawyer and you're faced with a quick time frame. So I enjoyed your statements. They were helpful to get your perspective. I think you have a very unique perspective here as a participant. To your question about the lines, one of my sister companies does have a lot of experience building 765 transmission lines. So AEP is, as a whole, is familiar with the 765 technology. It's a new technology to Texas, but we do have a robust transmission staff that is familiar with how to build the lines. And part of my opening remarks were that we have an obligation to serve our customers. And part of that obligation is to follow the law. And the law right now has set out what the CCN process is. And so we are going to follow that. At the same time, your experience, your personal experiences we all have had with the process, we are taking that into account. And the Public Utility Commission in Chair Gleason's testimony yesterday at the Senate Business and Commerce hearing, he also acknowledges there are some challenges and experiences that haven't been positive, and the PUCT has committed to looking at the process, and we will certainly work with the commission and you all to try to work within the rules and the laws to get process improvements.
Don't you think on a case this big, it would make more sense to have those people who have actually planned and constructed 765 kilovolt lines on the expert panel for the hearing?
So we
38% of the time they said we won't know until after a route is selected.
I understand that is a frustrating answer to hear when we all want information. We did have one witness for AEP, Mr. Wayman Smith. He does work for AEP Transmission, and he is our transmission planner. He is familiar with the 765 technology. If I recall the hearing, I think it just happened that not a lot of people asked questions that related to that. So he didn't testify a lot about his experience, but that's just a factor of the process, that it is quite a long process and there's different phases and different stages. And so we just have to work within the processes that we have, as frustrating as they may be.
If I can add in here, let me go ahead and make a comment here because and just cover the general frustration. You guys had years to plan this. These guys had days to respond and defend their property. That's the frustration. So you guys put forward the first plan, and while you may have statements on anthrax, you may have statements on karst in the EA, you don't have sufficient detail for the PUC to make an informed decision between routes. What you're doing is you're expecting these landowners that have days to put that forward into the record if they check all the right boxes and actually get let into the case. And then everybody has minutes inside the process to cross-examine witnesses. And so all of this is a very flawed process. I think we can probably all agree that. Rushing this and cutting it down to 180 days benefits you. It does not benefit the landowners. And so this is why, because of that entire process, that's where we are. That's what we are all having to deal with. And I'm not laying it on your feet. You guys didn't set up the process. However, what you do control is the beginning of that process and the years you have to put forward the best information to make the best route selection, and even whether or not the route is necessary, that's in your control. And so that's why I keep coming back to the EA. What did you reveal? How deep were your studies? And to say, we're not the landowners, we can't get out on the land, so we can't give you that kind of information is not sufficient. It is not. There's a lot of records that are at the county level that may be paper, they may not be online, that didn't get into the record. But somebody didn't go out and do the ground truthing. So I'm laying that out there. That's the general frustration. And so we keep coming back to say, did you guys inform the PUC of this? It's because we expect you to, because you guys had years to do this. They had days. And so to put it back on the landowners and say, well, you know, look, I'm sorry, we wanted you to get it in, but if you didn't have time to get it in, or, you know, didn't check the proper boxes, and if there's nothing we can do, really, the PUC is going to make the decision. So my point is, at some point, we have to take accountability for everybody's role in this. And that's where it all started, is that it?
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Brown, you good?
I'm good.
Okay,
Thank you for giving me the time.
that'll conclude our guest, okay? Now, we'll go into like the commission now, visiting with you and speaking. It may take a spin off of some of that. The next one we're gonna ask is Mayor Gomez here. In his role, and what we've suffered the last 5 years, 6 years, is how this could be a huge corridor for illegal immigration.
You gotta speak up.
It's gonna be a huge problem. It's gonna be, I dang it, turn them all off. Our next, Mr. Brown, thank you. Our next guest, our next commit, we'll turn it over now to the commission to start going through some things in a little topics and so forth. But our next address will be for what some of us have dealt with for the last 6 years, and that's illegal immigration and the corridor you're about to build. This is a freeway. I have the LCRA line that runs right through the middle of me. The Doppler radar is on us. Okay. The Browns get eat up with it. Sewell gets eat up with it. Mr. Smith gets eat up with it down on the north end of the county. Okay. I'll turn it over to Mayor Gomez here, and he can address it. And I'd like for him to share with them this evening, Mr. Mayor Gomez, what you do for a living, what you see, and what we deal with.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? So I can't speak to that as much as I'd like to, but I'm a law enforcement officer in this region. That is my professional job. If you can imagine, the mayor of Savannah position does not pay very well. It doesn't pay at all. So my question is, and again, it's not a gotcha question. It's a legit concern I have. What are the additional measures that y'all are planning to use with this increased, drug trafficking and human smuggling? Because it's going to happen. They're going to see this power line, and they're going to use it to guide themselves into our country with drugs and smuggling people, trafficking people. They're going to see it as highways. They're going to see it as a map, as GPS guide. It's going to happen. So my question to you is, what are the additional measures are y'all planning to use to help combat that?
I'll start. We've talked about this. We've seen testimony. We've heard of the community's concerns. I mean, I will tell you a couple of things. So with respect to the CPS side of this, they use a selective clearing process. So it's not their intention to clear cut to the ground. Now, that said, it's not like you're not going to be able to see the towers, and there is going to be a access road that you can drive in the right of way. So I don't think your question specifically about, are we going to clear cut all the trees? But as the testimony in the case indicated, CPS Energy has a what we refer to as a selective clearing process. So we minimize the clearing of vegetation to the maximum extent possible for the safe operation of the line. And that was a lot of words in there, but we cut the trees we have to cut. So it's not a process of clear cutting to the ground. Now, that said, we do understand that these lines are going to go for a long distance, and you can track them from one to the other. We don't install gates fencing other than we work with the landowners based on what their existing fencing is. So it's not our practice, and that's usually based on the landowners wanting to continue to use the property for agricultural ranching. That we don't put fencing or now we do have gate control access to make sure we can continue to access our right of way, but that's a gate that has a lock on it that's controlled by the utility. Can people climb the fences and the gates? I mean, they're going to be the same kind of fencing and gates that are on the property already. So what if there's a high game fence, then we'll work with the landowner, put a high game fence gate in the property on the right of way. If it's low fenced or not fenced, we're not going to change how the property is used. That said, I don't know that we have anything better than listening to what y'all's recommendations are about how this corridor could be used and what your concerns are and what your experience is. If you've got, the El Cerre line is in a lot of ways further south than this line. So what is y'all's experience with how that's being used? What specific concerns do you have that you want us to address? I think we're open for understanding that.
So are there how many beacons are there going to be on these towers? There's going to be none?
None.
So,
So unless a tower is over 200 feet, it's typically there's no lighting on it, and we don't anticipate these towers being that high. The average height we expect will be 140 to 160 feet, and until they get pretty close to 200 feet, the FAA doesn't require any lighting on them. So short of the landowners wanting lighting for some kind of a private airstrip or something like that, there won't be lighting on these towers.
Okay, because these people from Mexico, and when they're geographically, we're in a bad spot in Mexico because there's on the other side there's a lot of mountains that they can oversee, and the lines that we have in Sabinal currently, you can see that from miles and miles away. So I'm almost certain that the cartels in Mexico on the other side of the border, they're going to see it for miles, and they're going to use that to guide themselves in. And I know I'm going back in a circle there. But without that proper lighting, at least on the bottom, it doesn't really provide a good sense of security for the people on the ground. And on the top, that kind of brings a little bit of comforting because the lighting on the top of the beacons, it helps provide guide. So I'm glad to know that there won't be too many lighting to those power lines.
Yeah, we heard a lot of that from the community during the case of not wanting to interfere with the dark skies around the area. And we support that. But yeah, there's not typically any lighting on the lower parts of the tower, and that's usually the landowner's preferences. If they want lighting around the bottom, I suppose that's something we could discuss. But typically, the landowners are wanting less lighting, not more on our towers.
Okay, anybody else? All right. Just kind of working down my bullet points here on this deal, just to kind of make sure we're covering some things. Like I said, there's no script here or nothing, anything like that. Mr. Mims, would you like to address your question at this time or concern?
My largest, is this working?
Yes, sir. Yes.
My largest concern has to do with the rural landowners. And frankly, if they were not going to be as severely impacted by this project as they will be, I doubt they'll be here tonight. So I think this is a critical issue. They're going to be seriously impacted, and I think maybe we could put ourselves in their shoes just for a moment. And you will see through their eyes that the largest transmission project in the state of Texas is going to sever their properties. And a lot of this land has been, as Scott said, in single-family ownership for generations. A lot of these ranches have historic value. That's going to be disrupted. Their countryside will be forever disrupted. Their rural lifestyle will be forever changed. And there is no monetary compensation that can be enough to make this right. Once that trigger is pulled, damage is done. And this is all to lead up to my question. I think it's critical that we can say without any question that this project is needed. And to do that, we need to know if there have been studies, comprehensive focus studies on that question. Are there alternatives to this project? And so, well, there's two things. Is it needed? And if it is needed, are there alternatives to it? If there are not alternatives to it, and if it is needed, then have there been comprehensive studies to determine if there are things that can be done to minimize the currently expected impacts on these landowners? Have there been studies to? And so I'm asking, can you provide us documentation to show how you have reached the conclusion, if you have, that this project is needed? Can you provide us what you base that conclusion on? And I think I'll just leave it there for a moment. I may have a follow-up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start. So Ms. Houle talked about yesterday, there was a meeting of the Senate Business and Commerce Committee in Austin. And they called in front of them the chairman of the Public Utility Commission, the president, CEO of ERCOT, the grid operator, and the chief operating officer for ERCOT. And they testified for 4 hours, those two groups specifically, about the issue you're asking about. Is this needed? And what I can tell you is that the chief operating officer for ERCOT was asked directly by the chairman of that commission, is this needed today? And is this needed tomorrow? And his answer was an unequivocal yes. And so I don't think any of us sitting here are, qualified to be transmission planners. We do understand the process. And I think to a person on this side of the table, we would tell you the smartest people in the room about managing the grid and the reliability are losing sleep at night worrying about our grid crashing and about the load growth in the state and the ability to move power around the state. And so the testimony from the CEO of ERCOT, the chairman of the commission, and the chief operating officer of ERCOT was that this project is absolutely needed, and the most minimizing impact to the state of Texas is a 765 kV plan. And there was a lot of testimony yesterday about if you don't do this, then you would have to replace it with numerous 345 kV lines. And so I'll tie this back to one of the questions that was asked. One of the things you see from us, in some regards, this is not different for us from a 345 kV project. They're taller. A 300, if you drive along I-10, those towers are taller than what we're proposing. They have more conductors in the air than what we are proposing. And in a lot of ways, to landowners, they're more impactful than what a 765 kV line would be. The testimony at ERCOT in their study was it would take a minimum of 5 and probably 6, maybe 7 345 kV corridors to achieve what we're doing with 3 765 kV corridors. And so when the Utility Commission evaluated the options that ERCOT brought to them, they made the decision that the most minimizing impact is to have minimal, larger corridors than more, 345 kV corridors. Now, that doesn't help the landowners crossed by this line, but if we were to scrap the 765 kV, what you would see is something that looks very similar. That's 345 kV, and then there would be something a little bit further north, and a little bit further north, and a little bit further north. We'd have 5, 6, 7 corridors of 345 kV, and what there would also be is a lot more intermediate stations, because with a 765 kV line, you can go a lot further without an intermediate station. And so for a line like this, you can go a long distance without having an intermediate station. And intermediate stations at 345 kV, they attract wind, they attract solar, they attract data centers. So every time you build a 345 kV line and you put a station on that, it's going to immediately, and we can tell you, we file these projects, that when you file a project for a 345 kV line, as soon as you have that station location, all of the property around that, it's going to get acquired by wind, solar, data centers, batteries to connect to that 345 kV line. So when the chairman of the commission, and it's his decision to make, and he's appointed by the governor, so he reports to his boss, when they're looking at the least impact, and again, I know this is not helpful to the people crossed by this line, and we get that. I promise you we do. But when they're thinking about the least impactful decision, a long line without a lot of intermediate stations is less impactful to the community than having a 345 kV line that's got a station every 50, 75, 100 miles that's going to immediately be swallowed up, everything around it, with lots of development. And that's what we see when we build a 345 kV line. And I mean, Mr. Giles and I and Mr. Otto, we did a 345 kV line from Howard to San Miguel. You know what happened right around Howard? That whole property got bought up by data centers and batteries, right? Immediately, as soon as that line got announced. And so I hear you and I understand, but for those of us that work in this industry, our view is, and it's the chairman of the commission and the commissioners that voted for it, they voted for a less impactful process for the commission was the 765 kV lines, because you can go a lot further. It's not going to be interrupted. Now, we're still studying, are we going to need one intermediate station versus if this was a 350-mile line of 345, I can promise you there's going to be, you can look at that LCRA line. There's multiple stations, right? To get from where it goes near Kendall to West Texas. And so there's multiple stations. You can go look at all those stations. You can see what's getting attracted around them. It's solar, it's wind, it's batteries.
I've got a comment.
Could I follow up?
Absolutely.
Just real quickly, I keep hearing that there are natural gas pipelines all over this state. And so I'm wondering why, if power is needed in the Permian Basin, why can't it be fueled by natural gas and generating stations be built where it's needed, and do that throughout the state using our natural gas that's being flared?
Or put another way, if people with ERCOT lay awake at night trying to keep the grid from going down, I'm just country, one thing in, but it seems like we ought to put some generation in these other places and eliminate all this line, because when you move a line that many hundreds of a mile, there's some inefficiency. I think the electricity loses some efficiency as it goes that way. And so it just seems like it would be more, and I know y'all are in the transmission line business and not the generation, but to me, it makes more sense to put generation where they need it, because if ERCOT's worried about the power supply of Texas, they are doing nothing about increasing the power supply they're doing something about moving it around. And so if you're worried about a supply, you increase the supply.
Yeah, so in the nineties, state of Texas made the decision to have a competitive wholesale power grid. And that means that generators are independently operated. They are not. Now, CPS is a unique example. As a municipally owned utility, it does own some of its own generation, but in general, in the state, ERCOT has no ability to direct or control generation to be built, nor does the Public Utility Commission. So generation is built based on market signals. And so, and the other thing that the Senate Business and Commerce Committee heard a lot of testimony about yesterday was, why isn't generation being built? And the answer is the market signals aren't telling people that they can effectively build a gas-fired generating unit and recover their investment.
But if you don't have if you don't have the transmission line, that would signal the market, we need generation out there, because you're putting a Band-Aid by using a transmission line, you're putting a Band-Aid on that need.
It actually works the opposite way with generation. And so if what generation wants is the free flow access to be able to move their generation efficiently throughout the grid. And so what we would see on this line, frankly, is in the daytime, this line is going to move wind and solar from West Texas to the east. And that's more efficient for us because that's on a per megawatt hour, that is a way lower cost to consumers, is the wind and solar out west. And right now that power is trapped. It's constrained from being able to come this way, right? When we're all using our air conditioners and when we're using our pool pumps and everything that we use in the daytime, then we go to bed and all that stuff ramps down. And in West Texas, that oil and gas load just goes 24/7. And so, and the wind dies and the solar stops. And so what's going to happen on this line is all the generation from the South Texas nuclear plant and all of the fossil generation in the east, all that power that's now stuck is constrained from getting to the west is now going to flow to the west. And if you remove those constraints, then you get people wanting to invest in generation because it doesn't matter where they put their generation. They can put their generation in the most efficient location because they know they can sell it anywhere in the state. And so, putting on CPS Energy's generation hat, what we want in part, as far as siting and owning generation, is a free flow of transmission to be able to move that power efficiently throughout the state. We own solar, west, and we own fossil south. And what we need is the ability to move it efficiently so that the lowest cost provider, and then that helps all of us, because then when you're buying electricity, you're paying for the lowest cost power rather than the most local power.
I have a question. If this work. I'm sorry, it probably sounds silly, but I'm new about power lines before I joined this commission as much as I knew about brain surgery. So again, it might be a silly question, but basically what AEP and CPS are doing here, is it kind of like just putting extension cords all across the state? Is that kind of, is it a fair equation?
The proper analogy, and this breaks down a little bit, but it's like building an interstate highway. In fact, it's a little more like building a super toll road. For something like this, if you've been on a really large toll road that doesn't have very many off ramps, it allows you to get from one large location to another large location. And so that's what we're building, is the transmission superhighway to be able to move the power most effectively between the biggest areas of the state. And then the 345, the 138, all of those are your locals, state highways and county roads that are then allowing people to move more locally.
I just don't see how that's, it's new to me.
This is why we're here. No, sir, this is why we're here.
I just don't see how that's like cost effective just to build a bunch of power lines versus just building a big plant somewhere, in West Texas or East Texas or wherever you need the power. I just don't see how it's more cost effective to pay all these landowners for these rights to their ranch I don't know how that's cost effective to build these lines versus just building one big investment in a certain part of Texas.
Yeah, the answer is in a free market, in a free generation market, the incentive is not there to build power in West Texas. And that's with essentially free gas, right?
Yeah.
Because the gas out there is a low or negative price. It's not the fuel. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into building and operating a power plant, includes water. And, you know, we don't have a lot of water in West Texas. And so there's a lot of factors that go into how you would invest billions of dollars to build a new large natural gas fired generating unit. And, you know, in order for investors, we're talking, you know, the Wall Street people with the money that want to invest in power plants, it has to money out. And what we're seeing right now is the market signals are telling them that, you know, they're not building, because when ERCOT evaluated this problem, they looked at all the generation that was forecasted, proposed, and they found that there's a significant lack of anything in West Texas. The market's not telling people to build there. But what you can do is the only tool they have, because they can't force people to build generation. The commission can't force people to build generation. We offered incentives through legislation a little while ago, and that generation showed up in the east and in the south, and it didn't show up in the west. And the answer is, and I'm not here to tell you how to site a generation plant, because that's not my expertise, but I can tell you the people with the money can't figure out how to do it and make money. And so that's why they're not building.
Okay, Judge, may I?
Ms. Prophet, you got a question?
Yeah, let me just make a point. So really the question for this group is not how this line is going to benefit the rest of the state, is how is it going to benefit this community and this jurisdiction. So right now, they're going to have all the impact, but they're not going to get any of the electricity directly. And I don't know that you guys really understand the actual impact, because, you know, if you come in and you take the right of way, you're going to pay for that right of way, but you're going to pay the least amount that you possibly can for that right. You know that. That's how the condemnation process works. What you're not going to pay for is the 40% reduction in value of that property that borders it. That is the uncompensated property loss to this community. And that then affects every tax roll, all the property values, whether these communities can fund their schools, their fire stations, their emergency services. It all trickles down to that. That's the uncompensated property loss to this community. So that's really the only concern. All the Permian is going to fuel itself, and their energy is their problem. This is this community's problem. And so that's really the question. The answer that you're going to have better utility rates is not going to be a good answer. That parts of Houston or San Antonio aren't going to have blackouts, that's not going to help these people, because as the electricity flows over and they're out of electricity, they have their land condemned to help everybody else in the state except them. So that's the question for here, is how does this benefit this community?
Understood. And, you know, we're all part of the interconnected ERCOT grid. So it's not, I mean, if we get to a blackout situation, it's not going to be a Houston problem or a Dallas problem. It's going to be an all of us problem. It'll be rolling blackouts everywhere. And y'all are probably a lot more equipped to handle that with on-site generation and than people in Houston might be. But your questions are good ones, and they're policy questions. And it's why the Business and Commerce Committee of the Senate was discussing it yesterday, because these are policy questions that the governor and the elected officials are making these policy decisions. And where you see us a little bit limited is we have an order from the Utility Commission saying, bring us this application. And they ordered us to do that in April of 25. Bring us an application and get it done by 2030. And so we're responding as utilities to an order of our bosses, the Utility Commission that regulates us, It said, bring us an application for this route. To Kip's point, if CPS says no, it's gonna be Encore, or it'll be Centerpoint, or it'll be elsewhere. It'll be another utility that'll say, okay, we'll build it. It'll be somebody else. And so your questions are good ones. And they're questions that Mr. Brown should raise with the commission. It's questions that the community can raise with the commission, and they've heard a lot. And to Mr. Giles' point, I can't tell you how that's going to turn out. I don't know what the chairman of the commission is going to do. I don't know what his 4 colleagues are going to do when this application comes. I don't know what the legislature is going to do. They're talking about it. They're hearing from the communities. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the policymaker's decision about whether this is in the best interest of the state of Texas. And they have heard a lot. They heard a lot yesterday. They heard 8, 9 hours.
Microphone.
They heard 8 and 9 hours of testimony from landowners.
Yeah, went till 12:30.
So they heard testimony from landowners about, like yourselves, of how this is impacting rural Texas. And what they're going to do, I can't tell you, but they heard. But ultimately, the policy decision is going to be theirs, and we're the ones implementing it. And I know that doesn't help. But we're here to do what we can to answer the process and explain to you what we're going to do to work with y'all. But ultimately, the decision about whether to move forward is theirs.
I had a question, you brought something up. How is the state just paying for this in construction? How do you all go about getting this done?
Borrowing it.
Because I saw something about AEP got a loan with the Department of Energy for $7 billion recently. Is that true? The federal government, federal loan?
That was the Department of Energy loan. It's not associated with these CCN projects, these transmission projects. That was for energy efficiency type efforts and other federal government programs that we can receive benefits from, and then pass those back on to customers.
So when y'all do take out loans, is it going to be with the Department of Energy or is it private loans?
No, they're private loans.
Okay. You got some?
I do. I'm going to my comments or questions are going to be a little different. I'm an elected official. I said commissioner for Uvalde County, or precinct 3. Precinct 3 covers most of the eastern part from Uvalde going east. And I go from the Real County line, which I would include the communities of Concan and Utopia. I know they were very heavily involved in fighting that from that Edwards recharge area, come down through Sabinal and go all the way to the Zavala County line. And that's where these routes are going. So I'm coming from a standpoint of questions that I have constituents, and how do I answer their questions? And so let me first state, I like electricity and I use it, and I don't use an AEP line. I am a Medina Electric co-op, live in a rural area. So I use a line that's owned by Medina Electric. I'm not going to be affected by this line in any way. It's going to be far enough south. I probably won't even see it, but I do oppose it just from a standpoint that constituents that I have, and I really represent all of Uvalde County, but my precinct, I'm getting a lot of feedback. And so let me get to the question, kind of the statutory requirements for the issuing of the certificate of convenience and necessity is set forth in the Public Utility Regulatory Act, and it's section 37.056, has several different things that they have to meet. One of them is community values. We've kind of talked about that here. And so I don't know how this line, it doesn't benefit community values. So I have a hard time answering that question. Historical and aesthetic values, I can't answer that for the constituents because we haven't talked about historical sites Indian burial sites, Indian mounds, all that kind of stuff that's gonna cross over. But probably the most important item that needs to be considered and factored in for this CCN is the probable improvement of service and or lowering the cost to consumers in the area. Since CPS is building a line through Uvalde County, they would be responsible. None of the constituents are customers of CPS, so you're not going to improve their service one bit. You're not going to lower the cost one bit to them. Some of them may be AEP residents, but AEP is going to assume pass the costs along through their transmission line charge. And so really they're not lowering the costs, they're going to be increasing. But a large part of mine is like I said, through Medina Electric. And so since they own the power, to use your analogy, it's a super highway, it's a toll road, it has no exit ramps. That line is going to go over all the property, and it's not going to benefit anybody. And so I guess I'm coming from you as a representative of Uvalde County. How are you going to improve, how is CPS going to improve service and lower cost? I don't know that you can. And for that reason, I don't see why it's, unless there's some sort of exit ramps, that would be the only way to improve the service. We're not going to lower the costs, I repeat, because we don't pay CPS anything. So how do I address concerns about we really need it because it's going to help you in this way? I don't have an answer. How is it going to help constituents of Uvalde County?
I mean, I would start. I mean, I understand your question. I mean, it's just like the thing she was bringing up about the people that are impacted. But I mean, it's the community, it's the benefit to the entire grid. I do think that it could result in a lot more quality generation around the state, and then that will affect prices. And I think that drives down prices for all the users. I mean, that's the best answer I've got for you.
But today, it will not help anybody in Uvalde County. Today, tomorrow, and for the foreseeable future, it might generate some generation, but I think that's way off. And that's kind of speculative.
Yeah, I mean, the commission's going to decide whether we have met the application criteria. And they're going to start with Pura 37056 and the factors that you listed there. I will tell you, for large scale projects like this, they're looking at it more holistically on the region and the ERCOT grid to meet those criteria. And so if you look at our testimony and our application, when we're answering that question, we're answering it for the nature of that project. Now, if this was a 5-mile Medina Electric co-op line, you're going to see a lot of testimony about how this is improving reliability or cost
Right.
for the local customers. For a large regional state project like this, the benefits meeting that statutory criteria are in a much more holistic, what is in the best interest. For a project like this, when we think about community, we're thinking about the ERCOT community. What's best for is it going to reduce constraints? Is it going to lower costs overall? We believe yes. So when we look at a large scale project, we think of community as the state. And I know that doesn't.
I understand that. I respect that. And it's something that it's hard for me to defend. And I love my fellow Texans, but when we're having water shortages in this area, East Texas doesn't come help us out. And so, I want to be fair that we need to help wherever these transmission lines go across.
The best answer I've got, and I know it's not a good one, is it's the reason why we have 5 utility commissioners that are appointed by the governor, who's elected by the people, to neutrally look at this. It's why AEP and CPS didn't get together and say, hey, we want to do this. That was the old days. That was pre-75, right? Where these, and you can look at those lines, they're straight as a chalk line, right? The utility said, I need to get from here to here, and those lines are straight as an arrow. I mean, you can look at the map and say, oh, that line was built before 75 because the utilities had the power of condemnation and they built it where they needed it. And we made the decision in 75, we're going to have a neutral decision maker to overview this process. And they're going to be appointed by the governor, and they're going to decide what's in the best interest of the state of Texas. And it's a democratic process where if we don't like what the utility commissioners do, we throw the governor out. And that's, I mean, we're sympathetic. We are. And
I know that.
I mean, we do understand the impact we're creating to the community. And unfortunately, the best answer we have is we've been told by the commission, this is what's in the best interest of the state, and we're following their direction.
Because I don't know, are those commissioners, are they regionally located or are they just at large?
They're at large.
And so we really don't have, I don't know who the commissioners are. I'll admit that. I've seen the names, but you know, I'm not aware that we're represented by anybody, or they're not stepping up because we would be talking to them. I assume they're from bigger metropolitan areas, and the poor rural people don't have the representation. That's not y'all's fault. It's just an observation for the rural Texas.
Yeah, generally speaking, the betterment of many is the cost of a few.
Yeah.
And I want to make a comment. And I don't want to seem like we're coming at anyone's throats or we're, but it's not like we're being far-fetched or, we look like a bunch of rural local officials with tinfoil hats on. I just, in reality, we're getting a lot of pressure, from our people. I got it from Scott, the very thing this started the commission. I got it ugly from Scott. It's just, I don't know. I just don't see how it helps Uvalde County. And again, I know we've gone in circles around this. I just feel to make the comment, it doesn't help. And I know going back to the border issue, we can sit and tell you all day, what we can do better, but it's still going to bring danger to the communities. It's, we can cut the brush, we can do all kinds of things, but they're still going to see it. The cartels are still going to see it from Mexico, and they're going to exploit it. I just, personally, again, I really wouldn't want this coming through Uvalde County. I don't. But again, it's nothing. We're not trying to go to anybody's throat. We don't have tinfoil hats on. It doesn't help us. And that's what I'm just, wanting to throw out there before. Take it when y'all leave. These are where these questions are coming from.
Okay. Great, you guys.
Quick question. So the agenda, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it has several issues and there's more that aren't included in the environmental assessment. But the environmental assessment, that stage of the process is already included. Is that correct?
What we included in our application is concluded now. To Mr. Brown's point about the 38%, I would tell you that's not unique to 765 kV. If this was a 345 or a 138 kV line, we would have the same thing. We would tell you, we can't tell you the geological survey until we have survey permission and we can actually drill boreholes and tell you, is that karst, is it not, what is the soil? We can guess, we can look at maps, we can make assessments, but until we get access to the property. So a lot of what you heard, we don't have access to the properties to be able to get that information. And logistically, the commission hasn't required us to try and get survey permission on 77 different routes and go in and access that, drill boreholes, do all that for every possible route alternative. They've said, bring us what you can. We'll make a decision, and then you're going to go do what's necessary to build the line safely and correctly and in accordance with the code and the requirements. And so I would say some things like, let's take cultural resource sites. We base our environmental assessment on everything that's publicly available. And we will be the first ones to tell you publicly available historical information. A lot depends on what project came before. So if there was a pipeline that went in front of us and they were required to do a historical assessment, we may have really good data. And on another area where there it's been privately held and no archaeologist has been on that site, we may show there's nothing there. And we may very well know there's probably something there, just nobody surveyed it. And so we're looking at what does the Texas Historical Commission have? What do they show us? And we'll be the first ones to tell you it is limited. And so one of the first things we're going to do a cultural resource survey when we get an order. We're going to look for what sites might be crossed by the line, what tribal resources might be along there, what burial site might be there that we should be aware of, and we're going to talk to the landowners. And a lot of times, y'all know, and in part of this process, we were shown pictures of caves and paintings and historical sites that we weren't aware of. And that'll all be, we'll do the best we can once a route gets approved. So the answer is we do what we can with the best publicly available information. That's in the environmental assessment. The commission uses that to make a decision based on all the factors that they consider: cost, right of way, how it parallels or crosses property boundaries, impacts to habitable structures, impacts to the environment, impacts to cultural resources. And then they'll pick a route, and then we're going to do everything we can. We're going to work with Texas Parks and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife on endangered species impacts and mitigation. So the answer is we do what we can with publicly available information. And then there's going to be a follow-on where we're going to do surveys. And if we think there's an endangered species, we're going to do a survey to determine if they're present, if the right habitat's there. And we've heard things about various plants and wildlife that landowners have told us those are present. We don't discount. They brought us in this case studies from biologists that said, here's a fish-hook cactus. It's right here. It's right there. And we don't dispute that, but we didn't have access to the property to find that.
Well, and this isn't a shot against y'all, but the process is very flawed. You're supposed to have a route determined, picked, before you can do a reliable environmental assessment. And then after you get there, then you really are able to do an environmental assessment. It's like flying a plane or building a plane while you're trying to fly it. The process is flawed, very flawed. In my opinion. But that's what I was wondering about is I know there's several things that we've identified that aren't included in the environmental assessment. I was wondering, well, if you're not going to include them now, when are you going to? But it sounds like the application process, that time is done. So I think there's some very detrimental effects on this in the entire process. Again, y'all not come up with a process, but I have to offer a question.
Well, good.
At the
What I would add to that, though, is you guys could do a more robust environmental assessment. And that is, I know I've read a lot of environmental assessments, unfortunately, over the years. And it can be. That's where really the responsibility is on you guys to pay attention. That part of the process isn't in the environmental. That's where you have a couple of years to do that.
Speak up.
So the commission ordered us to bring them an application for this line in April of 25. We filed our application on March 1st, 26. So respectfully, we did not have years to prepare this application. This is the longest line in the state of Texas, 350 miles. And we brought the commission an application in order to have the project constructed by 2030 from April to March. So it was less than a year. And that was based on the order that said this line has to be constructed by 2030. And you start working backwards, that application had to get filed in March of this year. And so that, respectfully, it was, and I don't disagree with the process. And testimony from the president of AEP Texas yesterday and from CPS Energy yesterday in front of the Business and Commerce Committee was, we don't disagree. This is the process that the legislature brought on. It used to be a year process where we could have explored a lot of these issues in a lot more depth in the hearing process, and the legislature changed that to 6 months. They made that decision because they wanted the process done faster so lines could get built faster. They made that call, and there were several of them that were sitting there in the meeting yesterday, and they said, we voted for that, and we're not sure it's still right. and they're thinking about that. And what the testimony from CPS and AEP yesterday was, there are process improvements that can and should be made. And we, both companies, committed to work with the legislature and the utility commission to do everything we can to improve the process. So we don't disagree that there are improvements to be made. And the timing that's driving this made this difficult for everybody. And so we agree. And we agree that the environmental assessment, we stand behind the work that we did in the time we had to prepare it with the resources and the access to property we had to bring that application. But we would have loved, and I can tell you our consultant would have loved to have had another 6-8 months to study a lot of this in more depth and to be able to analyze from information we got from landowners in a lot more depth. And the timing of this process ordered by the commission didn't give us that ability, but we stand by what we brought them in the time we could.
Did I understand that before this recommended route was recommended, that there was no determination that there existed any federally listed endangered species along that route? Did I misunderstand that? Did you all evaluate, did anybody evaluate this route to determine if there are federally listed endangered species anywhere along that route? Because that could very easily be a fatal flaw.
On Route 4?
Yes, sir.
You mean?
Yeah.
We knew that it was outside of the known range of the golden cheek warbler. So we did know that. We know there is potential for certain other endangered species to be present. I can tell you, we've done a number of projects working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It is not uncommon once a route is approved, and we've had routes on CPS, AE has to, where they've been approved through known endangered species habitat. And we work with Fish and Wildlife to manage those impacts. And sometimes it's based on construction schedule, based on the nature of the particular species. Sometimes it's based on mitigation, where they may say, okay, you can take 5 acres, but you need to buy a conservation easement for 15 acres over here and set it aside. And CPS Energy has a habitat conservation plan. The city of San Antonio, Bexar County has a habitat conservation plan that we utilize with U.S. Fish and Wildlife when it comes to impacts to endangered species. So I would say it's not a fatal flaw. It's a permitting issue that we work with Fish and Wildlife to construct the project in accordance with the Endangered Species Act, and Fish and Wildlife, who are responsible for managing that legal authority.
So do you have an incidental take permit then with that habitat conservation plan?
For some species in some areas. So it would,
When was that finalized? Or
a few
updated?
years ago. About 5 years ago. Now, the CPS Energy one, I will tell you, it doesn't come this far. It's limited geographically and it's limited by species. And the Bexar County one is more extensive. And it's one that we have the ability to utilize.
Not sure if it covers this area.
But we would have to
Southern
look at
Edwards Plateau is set.
Okay, so are you guys thinking of amending that incidental take permit in the habitat conservation plans?
We are in discussions with Fish and Wildlife about whether it, how it would be best to move forward, whether it would be to amend that or whether it would be just deal with a particular, permit application under the Endangered Species Act. So we're working with Fish and Wildlife about what would be the best way to proceed.
Can you share that incidental take permit with us?
Sure.
And the habitat.
I mean, they're both.
They're public.
They're public. If you Google them, they'll pop right up, but we
Can you
can't.
send a link?
We can provide the link to the
Okay,
judge.
that'd be great. And the actual take permit, not the federal register notice. And the actual take permit.
Sure. Yeah. The permits themselves. Sure.
But I can tell you right now, it does not cover this area.
Get a microphone.
It does not cover this area. The permit that we have exists.
So your takings permit will not cover our area right now for CPS to build this line.
accordingly.
That's a fact.
Okay. And we're recognizing that and acknowledging that.
Yeah, so the habitat.
So why would we not want to put the brakes on? Why can we not go back to the governor's office and say, Governor, as the best interest of residents and constituents of the state of Texas and the folks that are fixing to get impacted here, we need to put the brakes on this, because right here in the bottom of this letter that he wrote in 2021, it says clear communication and transparency, PUC and ERCOT. It's addressed to them, but we need to have the ability for y'all in your companies, in your organizations to go back and also be able to step up and say, hey, we need to put the brakes on this before we go to turning dirt, because we need more time. We need to get our ducks in a row, because this is a huge impact to our rural communities.
Understood. So a habitat conservation plan is basically a pre-negotiated agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, where the utility has an agreement. If this happens, this is what you'll do. It's pre-negotiated. That's what a habitat conservation plan is. And you go through multiple steps with Fish and Wildlife, and then you get that pre-authorization. The Endangered Species Act has a number of other provisions where we can get an incidental take permit through the act. It hasn't been all pre-negotiated. And so the first thing to do is, if we have a route, we survey the route, and we determine if there are any species present that would be impacted. And it is a species dependent survey, right? So for a particular plant species, perhaps, it might be that all you have to do is make sure your tower locations aren't impacting that particular location of the species. If it's a species like the golden cheek warbler, it may be different about, or as long as you're constructing not during breeding season, it won't impact the birds because they're not there. And so it's really a species by species consideration. The environmental assessment lays out all known areas and occurrences of endangered species in the study area, and including particular routes. The primary one I will tell you is golden cheek warbler. And one of the reasons Route 4 was identified is that it avoids golden cheek warbler range. But we have seen, and there was testimony provided by landowners about other species. I will tell you, almost all of it was in the north, not along Route 4. It was to the more rough terrain to the north.
Yeah, so. The status of AEPs, permits for conservation, is that the same answer for AEP? I know CPS just talked about it, but.
We're gonna have to look at our permits unless you know the answer, Chad.
Yeah, so we do not have a conservation plan like CPS does. So we would be relying upon, if on the AEP half of the line, whatever those surveys were to show as far as endangered species go, we would have to get the incidental permits to deal with those species in those areas.
How long does that take? To get it?
I don't know.
I thought that was a long-term process to get an incidental take permit from the federal government.
It would be within the timing of this line. Now, what you might do is stage construction around it a little bit, perhaps, if you had a particular area you were working with Fish and Wildlife. But I know this might not. We have a long-standing relationship working with Fish and Wildlife. They work with us to understand, and they're in the business of protecting species. But they work with us to understand how we can build their project, and they do it in a way that they believe is in the best interest of the act that they're in the business of enforcing. And then, there's, under the Endangered Species Act, there's all kinds of opportunities for the public to participate in that process. But it's our experience that those kinds of permits could be acquired in the timing required for this project.
Can I?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, let me just point out, so you will have to do a NEPA assessment. If you decide you have to do, why do you say not?
This is not a NEPA project.
But if you have to amend your incidental take permit, I mean, if you have to go in and amend your habitat conservation plan and your incidental take permit.
This doesn't trigger NEPA. This project doesn't trigger NEPA.
I know the project isn't, but it is a federal permit, it has federal nexus.
Respectfully disagree.
Well, let me just say it this way. When you do get into a deeper process, as you apply for an incidental take permit to amend what you have, to extend your habitat conservation plan, that is something that's going to have to be coordinated with this commission.
Understood.
Anybody else?
Judge, I have one more question. That's possible.
Sir?
I have one more question.
You got, okay, go ahead.
Does this project qualify for a Chapter 213 exemption, or will you be filing permits to get that process approved? And if so, could you walk us through how that works so that we can participate in those, or when that would happen?
What process are you talking about? Sorry.
Does this project qualify for an exemption under Chapter 213 under the Edwards Aquifer Authority, where you have permits that you need for approval? Does this project qualify that it needs a Chapter 213 permit? And if it does, when would that process and how does that process happen, or has it already happened?
You would have to look into that.
I can't answer that.
Okay, because we had talked about that there was a lot of experience in the Edwards Aquifer Authority and building in that area, but there's no understanding of when the Chapter 213 would happen.
Not by us. I'm not saying that CPS doesn't have that knowledge and plan. I'm just saying between the three of us, we can't answer that.
So at some point, if we could get, like, we're asking for help. Like, when this process happens, how do we participate? When does it happen? Where does that happen in the stage of all of this? Because it kind of sounds like this is a foregone conclusion that it's coming. So now we need to know, when is this going to happen? And how do we participate?
Basically, if it's the 213 with the Edwards Aquifer, if that is, this does qualify, needs that, we're asking to let
There'll
us
be
know.
notice requirements and we'll follow them.
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
I know what I'm saying, but that's what, I think that's what you're asking
Yes,
for, is this,
yes.
let us know as too, as a commission, that where we can come and participate in that and so forth, notify
We
us.
haven't dealt with that
Okay.
before.
We'll look into it. You'll look into it.
That's, yes, sir.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else?
Judge, may I make
Yes.
an observation? We all know there's the letter of the law. And apparently y'all are following that. What landowners would like to know is, are you willing to do something above and beyond just what the law requires?
And I think the answer is we're here today to have this conversation, to talk about that.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here. That's why the two utilities got together and said, we're going to come and we're going to have this conversation. And so I think this is a representation of that we understand we're going to be a long-term partner with the community, whether the community wants it or not, whether we want to be in the community or not. This is potentially, this may be a foregone conclusion. I will tell you, I can't answer that either. I can tell you my personal assessment of the need for the project and what I've heard by the people that have studied it, but I can't tell you how the policymakers are going to decide. But to the extent the project does move forward, we understand on the CPS side, and I know AEP does, that they're going to be long-term members of the community. And I know Jimmy spends a lot of time in this community as a long-term member of the community. And so we recognize that, and that's why we're here. And that's why I hope you've heard a lot of our answers today is we want to understand and work with. If there's specific things you want us to be aware of and implement, we're here to understand that. We're also here to do the job that we've been ordered to do. And we're going to do that as we're required to. But we're here to work with y'all to do that in a way that we hope can be the least impacting and manageable for the community in the best way we can. And we may not get all the way to what you would hope. But we're here to listen, and we're taking notes, and we're understanding. We're going to try and improve the process. We're going to try and do what we can to minimize the impact to the community. But at the end of the day, if the commission orders us to build a route for this project, we're going to do it in accordance with their order. Because we're ordered to. And if we don't, I will emphasize what Mr. Giles said. If we don't comply with their order, there's going to be another utility and they may not be as community oriented as these two. And that's the God's honest truth.
So maybe I need to ask a question. So the reason I thought y'all were involved is because one terminal end of the project is in CPS area station, and one end of the project is with AEP.
Right.
I mean, how would another transmission line company come in? I think y'all are the two most natural people to be involved.
That's
The default is that the utilities that own the endpoints are the default providers. But if we choose not to do it, or if we bow out, the commission can order somebody else to build it. And so if they've decided the project's needed and they decide we're not meeting the timeframes or we're not constructing it, they'll require another utility to build the project. And there's a process that if we decline a project where they'll order somebody else to do it.
I thought it was just a given that y'all were the people that needed to
I mean,
be involved.
it's the default, but you can.
Like you said, it's a natural choice.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. So to Kirk's point, because we own the endpoints, we were essentially the natural options to build the line. But it's not uncommon for other utilities, even though we own the stations, for other utilities to build lines between stations, and then it's just an interconnection point. When they get to our station, they essentially turn ownership over at that point. So to Kirk's point, even though we are the obvious choice to build the line, if for whatever reason we decided we weren't going to do it or didn't meet the obligation or whatever, another utility would step in and own that line between our two endpoints.
Anybody else?
All right, mine would be the swing variance distance. Let's say once we get boots on the ground and we go, oh, wait a minute. Got something here we gotta avoid. This property owner was notified, participated or not, it's irrelevant, but this one wasn't because in the initial plan, he didn't have a blue line. And now all of a sudden the line's over here on him. What's the variance that the swing can be here? I'm referring to it as a swing because I went to A&M like this young man did and this young man. So where like when we do get boots on the ground and we say it's going to be Route 4 and it's somewhere temporary in that red line, how far can it move? And now all of a sudden it's on this property owner and not this property owner. He still has to see it. What she referred to is that devaluation of his property because he's no longer had a benefit in it, but it's over here. What is that? What can that equate to?
So let me answer, there's two parts to that. So we don't have the ability to move off the route without a landowner's consent. So if we have, the line is located where we're proposing it.
Okay.
And so on some of these maps, it looks like a very broad, maybe it's somewhere here. I mean, the more you zoom in, we are in a very specific, precise GPS located, and we know we're on this property owner or we're on this, and we don't have the ability to move off of that line once it gets ordered without the landowner's consent. So I couldn't just say, well, this landowner is being difficult in acquiring a right of way, so I'm going to jump over to.
No, I'm not saying it wasn't that. It was all of a sudden, here's a cemetery
Right.
that we didn't know about until we got boots on the ground. And quarter of a mile over here is the property line. And over here, a half a mile or mile is a house, residence per se or something. And it ends up kicking us like, where's the tolerance there to say, hey, we're going to have to move, our line's going to move over because we're missing our straight line. We're moving a little bit. We talked about that earlier this evening. Can it move a half a mile? What could it move if it did move?
The answer is in the commission's ordering language. It requires us to make minor route modifications. So it goes back to that vague language in their order. about make minor route modifications. Now the language goes on, the current language. Now, are they going to use that same language in this order? If they issue an order, I can't tell you that. They have used other language in other cases. In previous large cases, they said you can make more than minor route modifications. So the community could ask for that in this case. But right now, the language says you can make minor route modifications as long as it's on noticed landowners who consent to the change. That's what the current ordering language says. So it's a minor route modification on noticed landowners with their consent. And so if your neighbor to the north didn't get notice, I can't put it on him, even if he consents to it without going back to the commission, based on the ordering language they've been recently issuing. And so in the case.
So each issuance of the order may vary. It's not a hardcore template. It can be subject to change as the process. Each route, whenever it's approved, that order can somewhat change in its language.
So I can tell you that the El Cerro project along I-10, that one, most people know that project, so I'll just keep referring back to that one. So that one had language in that order that said you can make more than minor route modifications. It had different language. Now, I will tell you for the last 6-7 years, they have used the exact same language. So they haven't changed it from the language I just kind of referred you to. But these cases are different. We've talked about that. There's been a lot of public testimony. And if the public wanted us to have more flexibility, that is certainly something that could be brought to the commission, that it would be important for us to have more flexibility to work with the community to make something more than a minor route modification. But right now, if they issue that ordering language, we're going to be confined to, I've either got to figure out how to work with the landowner to construct it, or I've got to move it with consent to a landowner that received notice. And our notice corridor was about 520 feet. Now, to Mr. Brown, he owns a lot more property than just 520 feet. So it's not 520 feet, but it's within the property of a noticed landowner. Now, if Mr. Brown and his neighbor to the north and his neighbor to the south all receive notice and they want to work with us and come up with a different routing, that is certainly something we could explore, as long as they give consent and they were all noticed for the project.
Okay. All right. Any questions to follow up on that one?
No.
Okay. My next one then would be the foundations and footings, as Mr. Huey referred to, and Mr. Sewell talking about our water. The tower structure for this route is not yet determined, according to your EA that I looked through and everything. It could be a single pole deal, or it could be the 4-footed tower, depending on the terrain. So whatever towers picked will be consistent from one end to the other, or will it be variance depending upon the terrain?
So the tower, so once we have a final order and detailed engineering begins, so essentially the towers that were shown in the application in the EA are just a tower family. So that's all towers that are at the disposal of the engineers when they go to do the final design of the line. And so as they do the final design and they evaluate, as Kirk was saying earlier, they do the geotech evaluations. They do all the evaluations that go into the detailed engineering for each location. They'll pick from that tower family which tower best suits that location. So there's towers that have 4 contacts at the ground. There's towers with a single point of contact at the ground. There's a multitude of towers. There's even towers in there that are designed to be flown in with the helicopter. So if they think that there's no physical way to get a tower pieces trucked up to that area, then there's special tower designs that can be flown in for those type of locations. So yeah, I mean the tower design themselves will vary greatly from endpoint to endpoint, just based on what they're up against at that specific location.
Okay. Anybody? Next, in these foundations and footings, what's the estimated size and depth of the hole? Because here's where I'm going with that.
Mhm.
If it's supposed to have 40 yards of concrete in it,
Mhm.
and this one took 42, and that one took 40, and this one took 38, but this one took 51, we just pumped a lot of cement into something. And if I have a well right over here, most of our wells are 160 to 200 feet deep. I never had a well problem. And now all of a sudden, I've plugged where I got a little recharge from my well, it just got plugged, but it's on wells over here on my neighbors and the holes over here. I would think, I'm asking that the commission be given the report of the geographical locations of every hole and how much cement was put in that hole. We'll have a tolerance, obviously, because I can't just dig a post hole with an auger at my country and know that, hey, it's going to take exactly two bags of cement and a piece of 2 7/8 pipe. Sometimes it takes 2 bags of cement and a lot of rocks I pick up right quick because somewhere down there, the side went away on me or something, and I'm just doing a 3 or 4 foot hole. I'm not doing a 30, 40 foot hole. What are we talking about here? 6 foot in diameter? I mean, that's the things that like we're addressing here is what's going on underneath there. And that's going to be boots on the ground. And that's where this trust and transparency is going to be a key player for us if and when this gets done. And that's a huge concern for me and my constituents going through my county, as you go further west, especially. Okay. I'll share with you this evening. This is your estimated red line. This was prepared by our water district engineer, our field engineers. Okay. This is a study done in 1940 from the Bennett Report wells in Springs. These are all the known spots that some exploration drilling was taking place. And they're abandoned now. Okay. This is our current status of the wells we monitor on this page of our water district and where your red line kind of in reference to is, but I'll give this to y'all tonight. Okay. But these are the concerns, not just for Kenny County, but also in Uvalde County. But I can share this. This is the kind of stuff that makes me a little nervous because there's quite a few spots over here where we're fixing to go through a lot of country that's usually just gone through by Mother Nature and God and an animal or two and maybe a guy on a horseback occasionally, not a bunch of equipment. Okay. So I would share that with you tonight as well. My huge concern here is the economic impact to my county and the devaluation of property, whether it's second, third, fourth generation, whatever it is. If for some reason we want to divide that property amongst our kiddos, who the hell wants this one that's got this power line running through it? Okay. Put our shoes on your feet. And please, if this means that you can go back and help change the process and slow this down and create a better process. Time is our friend here. And if we accelerate the time, we could set ourselves up for a huge detrimental, not to us, my kids, my grandkids. You're stripping these landowners of property rights. I no longer have the chance for a development, for caliche pit, for a data center, for a solar, whatever the case may be. We don't want those. But look at what you're doing to me as a property owner and my property rights by ripping through my property, our property, and those generations after me. I would hope my family can keep the ranch in the family and they don't want to sell it. But when they do, or if they have to, or if some other business opportunity, I now have a prime piece of property or a decent piece of property that I can reclaim and put a farm on. I can't put a pivot there because you don't want to pivot under this. So realize what you're doing. So when you go to compensate our landowners in Uvalde County or Kenny County, because that's who we represent, you said tonight you're getting to build 1 right of way instead of 2 right of ways. Compensate them appropriately. And I'm encouraging my landowners when I visit with them, realize they're building 1 right away taking rather than 2. And you obviously can see where y'all are going to make money on this, or else you wouldn't be dipping your toe in this deal. You've done the math. You might have only had 10 or 11 months to prepare this thing, but you had a whole team of people. That would be staggering to probably know how many attorneys y'all have and how many engineers you have that worked on this deal. We didn't. They didn't. The process, you're dealing with it, we're dealing with it. But we're asking for help from y'all on the process that Austin has developed to hear us, and you have tonight. We appreciate y'all coming and listening to us. But you're leaving our communities. May never see you again. I hope that's not the case. I hope if this moves forward, that y'all will gladly, hey, we need to meet with those guys again. We need to sit down with those folks. Because this is our heritage. This is our generation. This is what we're going to be able to give to our kids. This is the beauty and the scenery that people come to see, because they don't get to see it in Houston and so forth. And Ms. Russell, this is we're 2 years out from turning dirt, even if it got approved, say by the end of the year. I mean, heaven forbid, but so we're 2 years out from even getting that. Okay. The recent storms we had, the erosion that occurred on us, and it wasn't even like a right of way. It was brush country. Guys, we had water in places that I've never seen water. We got we're in a several month rebuild and reconstruct fences and roads and stuff. This kind of right of way cut through me would be even more devastating. The LCR deal that I have, they have some pretty bad erosion. Okay, not throwing sticks at them, but they really don't do worth a shit keeping up a right of way or communicating. They come in, we buy the ranch. My in-laws bought the ranch with the utility there, the line there. They come in several years ago, rip out 2 wooden poles, pour a big old thing of concrete, put a single metal pole up. We didn't get recompensated anything, but they got to upgrade their line. So think about that as you're going through this. And you're not going through just Joe Blow's property. You're going through families and so forth. You have a job to do, but I have a job to do as well. Thank you, each and every one of you, for coming this evening. I believe the commission can echo that sentiment and stuff. Thank you, folks, for coming in, attending, and so forth. But we will probably have another one of these with another entity, Parks and Wildlife, whoever, TCEQ, whoever, you know, as we roller coaster ride through this deal. Basically, for us, it is a roller coaster ride. Those are kind of my closing comments. You're stripping property rights from me, from my landowners. Your generational devaluation of property. 5 generations ago, the property was worth this, and look at what it's worth today. It increased in value, and now you're fixing to set that back on us. And we get no benefit here. Our communities get no benefit from the line. But in the grand scheme of things, the state, okay, we didn't generate more power. We're just moving dependent power and chasing back wind and solar and then shooting out the coal. I guarantee you, Union Pacific is all about it, because they're fixing to line up some coal trains. They're thrilled, because I used to work for them. I've delivered coal trains to the coal plant. But put yourself in our shoes. Have the courtesy to step up in Austin and say, guys, we need to pump the brakes on this a little bit. We need to make sure we're doing the right thing so that from 20 years from now, We don't have a oh shit moment. And that's the best political way I can put it. Don't wreck our communities and our lives for your benefits and your CEOs and your shareholders. We have shareholders too. They're called kids, grandkids, and so forth. I can't say it any better than that. Thank y'all for coming. God bless each and every one of you. You got a tough deal. We understand that. But we do appreciate your time. With that, I'll conclude unless somebody else has anything else to say. Anybody? Thank y'all.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Motion to adjourn. Second. Motion to adjourn. It is 8:39. Motion made by Commissioner Copeland, second by Commissioner Mims. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried unanimously. Thank y'all.